This is Walter Zapotachny with the 28th Infantry Division Oral History Program. It is November 6th, and I am here with former Pennsylvania Adjutant General, former 28th Infantry Division Commander, retired Major General Wesley Craig. Sir, thank you so much for taking the opportunity and the time to speak with us and tell us a little bit about your story. We greatly appreciate it.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Well, let's get started with some brief biographical details, if we might. Where were you born?
I was born in Philadelphia.
Okay. And what were your parents or siblings feeling about you joining the service?
Well, my dad was all for it. My dad was a World War I veteran and had two families. I was part of his second family. And my dad, in junior high school, had to drop out of school to help pay for the bills. World War I came along, World War I veteran. And he enlisted in the Army and went to the very first officer basic training course, or what we now call officer candidate school, that the Army offered. It was in Fort Niagara, New York in 1917. And he went on active duty, served his about 2 years in the Army, ended up in the G2 department in Washington, D.C. And that was basically his launch platform. He then stayed in the D.C. area, got employed by the Treasury Department, ended up going to college there at night. And he always thought the Army was really his launch pad. So he recommended to me, you need to go in the Army, and said this was 1964 when I was graduating high school. They said the Reserve Officer Training Program is a great program. I took a version of it. So that's what got me in there. So he was all for it. My mother, maybe not so much, but she realized going in as probably a second lieutenant was a little better than a private. So that's what got me started. And my dad was a big supporter of my military service.
Okay. What primary and secondary schools or college did you attend, looking back?
Okay, so I went to Cheltenham High School, which is a suburb just outside of Philadelphia. I then stayed home and commuted and went to Temple University, joined the ROTC program there, and as I graduated from Temple, was commissioned and went on active duty in 1968, and then came off active duty in 1970.
Okay. What kind of jobs did you hold prior to entering the military?
Really, since I went out of college, it was just college jobs. So basically, I worked 3 summers while I was in college as a carpenter's apprentice or carpenter's helper. So helped build houses for two different firms. And then when I graduated college, I only had about a month left before I went on active duty. So I went directly into the military.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like when you first entered the military?
Well, it was interesting. It was a draftee Army, and I was assigned to Hunter Army Airfield in Savannah, Georgia, as part of the Aircraft Maintenance Brigade. We provided support to the Army Aviation School. We probably kept about 150 helicopters that were stationed there, flying 2 different types of helicopters. And I was doing S1 work in the personnel administrative work most of the time in the brigade headquarters. For a while, I was the headquarters company executive officer, and then returned to the aviation brigade headquarters again as an assistant adjutant. So I'd like to say a paper shuffler for most of my time on active service.
Did you have the opportunity to turn any wrenches on any of those helicopters?
No, they kept me away from there because I figured as a second lieutenant, I didn't know what I was doing.
Okay.
And I guess I shook them up a little bit and said, "Where's the hammer and nails?" when I came down to visit the
Yeah,
wrench turners. So
there you go. What was your most vivid memory of your time in training?
my time in training. So probably we had a master sergeant in the ROTC, and I had who taught methods of instruction, how to be a military instructor, and he was absolutely tremendous. So that was challenging for me. I had never really done much public speaking. He helped give me confidence to become a public speaker, talk on my feet and think on my feet. And then we had another major in our cadre there, who was West Point grad, Mortimer O'Connor, and he taught military history, and he knew his military history inside and out. He also was a English major at West Point. So when you did your papers, not only would he grade them for military accuracy, military history accuracy, but also for English accuracy. So if you had misspelling or an incorrect sentence structure, you got hit for that as well. So probably those two gentlemen, as far as that goes, challenging me mentally to be a better person for that.
Okay. What was the best part of the training?
Well, the best part of my training in ROTC, I guess, was the 6 weeks basic training where I was up at Fort Indiantown Gap, living in barracks, and going out and being in the field all the time. So we're in the field constantly. Um, Small unit leadership training, marksmanship training, uh, training against insurgents that were running around there, and live fire training and the like. So that I enjoyed a lot. I really liked the field work and found it fun and challenging and exciting.
What was the worst part of the training?
Doing it in the rain. It was a wet summer, and we had plenty of opportunity to get wet. So, but of course, you had to keep training because there was only 6 weeks there, and it had to cover the entire course. So we did a lot of training in the rain.
And you mentioned this aviation unit, but was that the first 28th Division? Or what was the first 28th Division unit that you were a member of?
The first one I joined when I got out of the active army, I joined the 1st Squadron 104th Cavalry in Philadelphia. And my job was there. The job they gave me was squadron motor officer. So this time I did get a chance to be a wrench turner. So I did that for about 3 or 4 years, I guess, was my first job.
Okay. Did you qualify with any special equipment, radios or, weapons, anything like that that you recall?
Uh, Qualified on heavy equipment, learned how to drive a tank, a personnel carrier, a M88 tank retriever, which is an awesome piece of equipment because it's huge. It's even bigger than a tank. Qualified, of course, with all kinds of weapons, 45 caliber pistol, later on a revolver when we were armed with them, M16 rifles. I qualified with a M60 machine gun, then the M240 machine gun. So yeah, I qualified with a lot of different small arms weapons.
Well, obviously you received a lot of promotions, sir. So can you tell us a little bit about that progression, maybe?
Sure. I stayed in my first almost of my first 20 years, 20 of my first 22 years in the Pennsylvania Guard, I was in the CAV. And I progressed. I was the motor officer, then I became the logistics officer, or S4. Did that for a couple of years, then the S2 or intelligence officer in time for a large brigade on brigade annual training period at Fort Drum. That was a lot of fun. And actually operating and collecting intel for the brigade we were supporting. So that was first real time to do real cavalry intel work and reconnaissance work in the dirt. And then I became the operations officer, the S3 of the CAV, did that for a couple of years, liked that a lot. Then the executive officer, and then for a short period of time, I was moved to the 213th Regional Support Group, where I did more personnel and administration work again in the Personnel Administrative Directorate. And after a year and a half of that, returned to the CAV as the squadron commander. So by then, I was, of course, a lieutenant colonel. I was a squadron commander for 4 years. And they moved me, the adjutant general got a hold of me one day when we were turning in track vehicles on a Sunday morning in Indiantown Gap, told me they're moving me to the 56th Brigade as executive officer. At that time, the division was going from light infantry to heavy mechanized infantry. They wanted to capitalize on my experience with heavy units. So they kept me moved to the brigade. I was there for 4 years as XO, became 4 years as commander. And at that time, I was promoted to full colonel. I was graduate of War College by then. And after 4 years of that, the 56th Brigade, of which I was the commander, was picked to be the only striker brigade in the Army Guard because of our strength of numbers, our ratings as far as training went, and our equipment readiness ratings. So just as I left them, and I was moved to division headquarters as the deputy commanding general for support, the brigade was so designated. And then after a short period of about 6 months there, the deputy commanding general for maneuver deployed to the Bosnia rotation in S412. So I became the deputy adjutant general for both maneuver and support. And then in 2003 was promoted to division commander, served for 3 years as division commander. retired for the first time in 2003, no, 2006, and thought my military service was then done with 38 years of service. And I was really honored to have made the rank and positions that I did. And then 4 years later, the new Governor Corbett, called me and asked me to become the Adjutant General. So I returned active service for 4 more years and served as the Adjutant General from 2011 to 2015, retiring at that point for the second time at that point in January 2015.
Okay. Uh, Thinking back, what was the hardest part of the military lifestyle that you had to adapt to?
Probably the most difficult and challenging, again, was the mental thing. And that was when I was a division commander and we deployed large numbers of troops into the combat zones of Iraq and Afghanistan. And we started taking casualties. So my time as division commander, I believe we had 35 or 36 soldiers killed in action. And it became my job to oversee the casualty notification officers' work and the casualty assistance officers' work. And I went and met as many of the soldiers of the fallen as I possibly could, attended as many of the funerals that I possibly could. So that was mentally and emotionally a challenge. And then I became the Adjutant General. I lost 5 more soldiers killed in Afghanistan, 3 from a truck company and 2 more from an Apache crash, and got to work with those families again there as well. So it was a solemn duty, something I knew I had to do, and wanted to try and help those families deal with what the cards that they were dealt with. That and then visiting the combat wounded in Walter Reed. We took probably about 50, 55 wounded in action during my 3 years as commander of the division and 4 years as Adjutant General. So I got to be a regular commuter down at Walter Reed and hope that I helped those soldiers and the family members I met down there as well, talking to them and with my presence there.
What was the easiest part of the military lifestyle that you adapted to?
The easiest part, probably working with the subordinates that I got to work with at every level, at every unit. I found I had a group of people who wanted to really do a good job, and that's what made my job so easy. I was able to surround myself with some really great people who went above and beyond in almost every case, no matter what the job was, a training mission, getting ready for inspections, getting ready for deployments, coming back from deployments, dealing with the fallen. So that's what probably made it most fun, working with those people and seeing how well they responded. And then seeing, quite honestly, how well the National Guard responded when they went from a strategic reserve to an operational force, which happened in 2002 and 3 and 4 with the terrorist attacks. Because when the nation called, the Pennsylvania Guard, the 28th Division, was ready, really ready, and outperformed any skeptic. So that was easy, I guess I could say, and rewarding more than anything else.
You had soldiers in combat zones. Did you have the opportunity to visit any of those zones?
I did. I was in Iraq twice, Kuwait once, although not officially. Well, yeah, I guess it was considered a combat zone, and then Afghanistan once. So the biggest time I spent was a week on the ground in Christmas of 2005, where I was with the 2nd Brigade in Ramadi and got to visit every battalion and see just what those soldiers were doing right there. So that was my most memorable visit.
What are your recollections of that or other visits to combat zones that you'd like to share?
The determination of our soldiers to do a good job, to put down the insurgency, especially with the 2nd Brigade, the units of the 2nd Brigade that I dealt with. The combat patrol, the 2 combat patrols they took me out on. And then the camaraderie that was very evident among the soldiers of those units, and how strong they had become, what a great team they had built. Every battalion, I saw that. Not only the Pennsylvania Guard, but also got to visit a medical company that was reinforcing our company, and they were from Tennessee, I believe. No, the medical maintenance company came from Tennessee, and a medical company came from Indiana. And they were really very proud of their teamwork, very proud of what they had done, very proud of their work with the Iraqis. So that's probably the most memorable moments, talking and watching those guys and gals and seeing what a great job they had done.
Did any of those visits to those combat zones change you in any way?
I wouldn't say change me. Sergeant Major probably reinforced feelings that I had about them, that I knew they were good soldiers. I had seen them training. It was very rewarding to see how well they did when they were put to the test. So it reinforced very positive opinions I already held of these units that I had seen in training.
Okay. What kinds of friendships or camaraderie did you form in your years of service?
Well, I still am in contact with literally hundreds of soldiers that I served with. I also do volunteer work, as you may know, through employer support of the Guard and Reserve. I did a lot of volunteer work for the USO and got to meet the Second 104th Aviation when they came home coming through Fort Dix. Also got to as a USO volunteer, and then Andy Schaefer, the former division commander of the 28th, he came back with a deployment of the 28th, and he still, well, when he was the XO of the 56th Brigade, so he came back through Fort Dix. He still talks about me serving him hash browns at 3 o'clock in the morning. So, so I still have a lot of friends through, especially since I'm still active as a volunteer. I get to see local units. I get to know men who are now full colonels who were then captains when I was in service. So yeah, I still have a large circle of friends from the military.
Do you recall any particularly humorous or unusual events as you think back to your service?
Well, there's all kinds of, you know, because you were in the military yourself, there's all kinds of silly things that happen that you have to get a good laugh about. I remember one, I was a brand new captain, and I was out with the 88 tank retriever, and we're up at Fort Indiantown Gap, and we were driving around giving my crew driver training, and I was part of the crew. And it had snowed. There was a lot of snow on the ground, so we stopped on the side of the road, and I got out of the tank retriever, stepped in a ditch that turned out to be full of snow. It was about 4 feet deep, so I disappeared into the ditch up to my chest, and the crew on the tank retrievers thought that was the funniest thing in the world. It was howled for about 5 minutes at me up to my disappearing in the snow. And then there was another time when I was putting a high pressure hose on a hydrant up at Fort Drum, getting ready to help my crew wash the tank retrievers and so forth. And I didn't quite tighten it enough. And when I cranked the valve to turn it on, it blew the hose off, hit me square in the chest with the water, knocked me head over teacups back in the mud. Again, they thought that was a lot of fun too. So, there are all kinds of silly things that go on that you just have to have a good laugh about.
Yeah, that's right. Was there anything in particular that you did for good luck? When I talked to some veterans, they said that they carried a certain coin with them or, some kind of talisman. Is there anything you can think of that you did for good luck?
Not for good luck. I always carried my coin with me. In fact, I still have one of these right here. That I, of course, gave a lot of those out to soldiers doing good work. I can't really say it was good luck. I would, when I would go visit a combat zone, I would say a prayer for my own safety and for the safety of the people who were surrounding me. I always told my wife she never had to worry about me. I'd be surrounded with guys and gals with guns, and a lot of them. So I always would pray for them as well.
What was the best part of your service experience, do you think, looking back?
Well, several. Some of the best training and part of my service I ever got was when I was a senior leader as a brigade and then division commander. And was mentored by Lieutenant General David E. Grange. General Grange was a legend in the U.S. Army. He's just recently passed, unfortunately, at the age of 96, 97. After he retired as a lieutenant general, and he had 3 combat jumps as a paratrooper and 3 awards of the Combat Infantry Badge. He became a mentor to the Battle Command training program, and that's where I met him. And I learned more from that man about leadership, number one, tactical deployment of brigades and divisions, going both using historical background and then common day stuff, and just about being a better person. And he was one of my best mentors that I ever really met. And so that was probably the most memorable part of my career. And then what I mentioned before, the overseeing the transition of the Pennsylvania Army Guard, the 20th Division, from a uh, strategic reserve, which just like all other Guard units it was, to an operational force almost overnight, and seeing the great job that these young soldiers did when placed in very stressful situations in combat. Those two that kind of put the cap on it, because that's what I was in charge of, is training these people to do that. And when the nation called, they did it, and did it with great fortitude and success.
How do you think your service affected the way you deal with others, or has it?
My military service helped me gain a great deal of confidence in my ability to make sound decisions in stress. The military decision-making process that General Grange really drilled into us really does work in both military situations, business situations, and even your personal life. So I think that really has probably had the biggest impact on me.
How did your military service affect your family in any way that you can think of?
Well, it became quite a surprise to my wife. As we laugh about it now, when I asked her to marry me, she knew I was in the Guard and thought that I would probably be getting out after a year or two. And then, of course, a year or two became 3 or 4, and then I was promoted to captain, and then I was promoted to major. And then I said, well, I'll probably get out if I'm lucky enough to be a battalion commander. And then I was for 4 years, and then lo and behold, I was moved to brigade and became a brigade commander. So it really impacted my wife and our family life. And she, I must say, became a huge supporter of my military service. Um, when we had to deal with the killed in action, uh, she was able to come with me to a number of the funerals, a number of visits to families. And I can't tell you, well, I will tell you, the impact of a senior leader bringing his wife to assist a stressful situation like that really made it easier for the family, made it easier for me, but the families that we got to meet took great appreciation, the fact that I would bring my wife to a situation like this. So it meant a great deal to them. It meant a great deal to her, because she thought she felt rightly so that she was providing help and support in a time that they really needed it. So it really had a tremendous impact on her. And then my 2 children, I have a daughter and a son. They got to attend my changes of command, my promotions to general officer, and my return as adjutant general. That became quite a point of pride for them, and learning experience for them as well. So yeah, it had a big impact on my entire family.
Two more questions, sir.
Mhm.
What are some life lessons that you learned from your military service that you would like to share with up and coming service members, young service members who
All
just
right.
recently joined?
I would say the military service is a great place to start, a great place to grow, make yourself a better person. You're part of something that's more than just yourself, of a much larger group. You learn how to be learn teamwork and team players, because the Army is all about teams, whether it's a squad or a platoon or a company, a battalion, a brigade, or whatever. It also teaches you how to be a leader. No doubt about that. I'm sure there would be some people in my high school class would be astounded that I became a major general and had the responsibility that I did. It teaches you the importance of courage, of commitment, and competence, and how important it is to be a competent leader. So yeah, it taught me a lot, and made me the man that I am today.
Final question, sir. What was the one question you wish I would have asked you and I didn't?
I guess you sort of ask it, but did I find the service fun? And the answer to that is yes. Almost every day in the Army was a good day. The tough days were dealing with the families of the fallen, but the Army was fun. The Army was all fun. It was about overcoming obstacles, getting a group of people together to do that, get buy-in from them, work beside them, and see them do that. So yeah, it was a great experience overall, and certainly am glad that I joined and would recommend a military service to just about anybody who wants to grow and make themselves a better person.
Sir, thank you again for taking the time to tell us a little bit about your story and some information that hopefully will inspire young soldiers. And we really appreciate you taking the time.
Glad to do it, and roll on 28. Well,
Roll
Sergeant
on.
Major.